and so glad to be with you today. My name is Tim Scarbrough. I work at Ricardo, a global energy and environmental consultancy. And today I wanted to give you a bit of flavour of the maritime sector, just to talk a bit about the background, also the policy drivers which are driving change, and then to go on and following on from Neil's introduction, that we have a lot of work going on in the UK. Ricardo has been doing some work for Innovate UK, and I want to share some of the findings from that about from a UK PLC perspective. So first of all, I just wanted to introduce the maritime sector to you. It's a very global industry. This is traces of the ships going around the world. It's an international industry with about 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions. This is our driver for the need to change. So if it was a country, something like 8th or 9th in the world, depending on how you do the accounting. But when we say, one industry, what do we mean by that? It's a very diverse industry, okay? So there's a lot of different types of vessels, different ship routes, and that has implications for the ports. Lots of different types of ports with their port machinery, all needs to decarbonise. Some nice pictures of some different types of ships there to emphasise that. It all needs to decarbonise, and that's really some of the challenge. You know, the investment opportunity and the challenge is partly because of that diverse nature. So what are the policymakers doing about this? So let's start at the international level. So the IMO, International Maritime Organization, is the UN agency responsible for international shipping. And last year they set a net zero target for 2050. Has some intermediate checkpoints as well. The dotted line is what I've drawn on, but the intermediate checkpoints in the final target is what they agreed. So they are partway through their process. What is well known is that the shorter term can be achieved with some energy efficiency technologies for ships, but it's really to get down to the lower end of the scale, the industry needs to be shifting fuels. So that's what we know, the industry knows about and needs to prepare for. The next step for the IMO, because this is just a strategy, is to implement some policy measures to enact that into change. And we will hear in David's talk later an example of one of the policy options on the table for that. So that was at the IMO level. The EU has gone ahead of this. So they have already put in place a policy measure called Fuel-E Maritime. That is setting the requirements for the greenhouse gas intensity of the energy used on board. Now, the interesting thing that we've noticed is when we overlay the IMO strategy on a percentage basis, like shown in this graph, against the EU policy that's already in place, that means that we at Ricardo are expecting, based on our work that we do for the IMO and that we do for the European Commission, that we're expecting the IMO policies to be more ambitious than what the EU has already put out there. So this is showing there's quite a clear driver for change already in place and which will come to bear. I mentioned earlier on that there's technologies and fuels needed for the decarbonisation of the sector. So I just wanted to give a few flavours of that. On the technology side for vessels, there's different energy efficiency options. There's weather routing, propeller design, wind assistance. The shore power is that fantastic interface where the ports need to get involved to help decarbonise as well. And then from the fuel side, this is where we've done a lot of our work at Ricardo. We're very much a fuel and technology agnostic organisation. There are a lot of different pathways, and we don't want to push the idea that means there's paralysis in the industry, but it's rather going back to that point that I made earlier, that there's a very diverse industry. There's a lot of different requirements for different types of vessels on different routes for different fuels. So there's a lot of pathways for different fuels going through some biofuel options through to synthetic options that can get in the future, when they become more available, even lower greenhouse gas emissions on a well-to-wake basis. Just to give you an indication of scale, this transition on a fuel basis is really significant, okay? So we know that that is going to be needed to hit those targets for net zero at 2050. Currently, the industry is using globally around 300 million tonnes of fuel a year. In the future, by about 2040, when we've got electrofuels, there's going to be a need for about 500 million tonnes a year of that, which has an implication for the renewable electricity that is going to need to get deployed. That's around an additional 2 terawatts of capacity. Many of the fuels have got a hydrogen basis, so there's an additional need for around 1 terawatt of additional hydrogen production that's going to need to get deployed. Overall, some estimates are putting this investment level at around 3.2 trillion pounds cumulatively to 2050. A significant challenge and opportunity. And just a final flag, it's not just the maritime sector for many of these things. Other industries need to also decarbonise and are also going to need to have some of the same feedstocks, including hydrogen and renewable electricity like aviation. Now I want to move on to the second part of my presentation. I mentioned earlier that we've been doing some work for Innovate UK, and this is all about the transition to clean and digital maritime. Both transitions are happening. What we did and have been doing is looking at the various technologies in place and assessing the UK capability in the supply chain to deliver those technologies. So these are groups of technologies. So from a clean perspective, there's very much a positive story for the UK with a lot of, for the propulsion systems and the ship energy efficiency measures, there's a lot of existing great stories. There's more potential, I would say, for vessel digitalization and smart ports and vessel and port automation, where we saw there's already several positive elements and more potential for investment. So what do I mean by all of that? So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. We assessed for each of those specific technologies within the technology categories. We looked at on the vertical axis, the UK positioning for the opportunity, and on the horizontal axis, the attractiveness of the technology opportunity. And so the individual dots in this diagram are the individual technologies. And this is really helping us to make it clear that there is a focus for market development for clean vessel technologies, for propulsion systems and ship energy efficiency technologies. If I go to the digital ones that we looked at, the bottom two squares, the vessel digitalization and the smart port technologies face some more challenges, but really, as you can see where the red dot is, actually it's a more marginal case on the rating where we ended up with. For the vessel and the port automation technologies, that was also suggested to be a focus area. If I zoom in again and have a look at what that top right box looked like. So in particular, on those ship energy efficiency technologies, we thought that there were 5 technologies that needed to be a focus for market development. Those were that the UK is very well positioned for vessel design and vessel performance optimization technologies. It's also for batteries and short power. So what is labelled there is low carbon short power. They've got a high market development prospects. There's a high technology readiness level of these. Great UK manufacturing base and great potential to cut emissions. Equally, the advanced power management technologies, a great opportunity due to the energy savings. And one of the final technologies is air lubrication. Again, another high technology readiness of this technology. High potentiality, that means great opportunity to reduce emissions. The UK's got strengths in manufacturing. So some very positive stories. The top left, we put the wind-assisted propulsion in that box. That's more opportunistic, and actually there's potential for that to come into the top right to be a focus area if we get a few more prototypes demonstrating the capability of this technology rolled out. So overall, it's a very positive story. So I'm just going to wrap up there for you and to conclude. So as I mentioned first, policy is very much driving change and will continue to do so. And we're going to hear in the near term how much more stringent the targets and the policy measures are going to be at international level, which of course will filter down to EU as they transpose the legislation, and will also apply for international shipping here from the UK as well. We've obviously yet to see with the next UK government what the domestic policies are going to be. The technologies and the fuels are needed to decarbonise. So there's investment opportunities on both, very much shorter term scale for the technologies. The fuels, given the scale of the transition, that investment also needs to start in the short term, but will continue for a long time. And the UK is very well placed for both the clean and the digital transition from the work that we've looked at on both vessel side technologies and port side technologies. So thank you very much.